Thank you, everyone, for joining today, the webinar on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. We will be talking about creating an authentic mantra of business as usual. Michelle even mentioned before that just the word diversity just makes people uncomfortable, but we're going to talk about how to get over that and create an authentic mantra for your businesses and to handle diversity and inclusion, talking about best practices and also some policies in there. I want to thank Coleman and Michelle for the opportunity to actually present to you guys today. So thank you again, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Like she already said, the introduction, I'm currently a Chief Diversity Officer. I do want to, at Stephen F. Austin State University, I do have to add a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in the webinar are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Stephen F. Austin State University, its Board of Regents, or the state of Texas. So what are our goals today? Our goals are, how can we get to the point of diversity and inclusion being natural and business as usual? So what are some policies and best practices that we're going to talk about for us to get to that point? This webinar is designed to help you and your organization build a diverse workplace by creating and maintaining an inclusive environment for your workforce. How do you do that? You understand what diversity is. You understand what inclusion is. And now that you know that, how do I apply it to my everyday work? So today we are talking about something that comes from the heart, something that is natural. It seems that diversity is always equated to race, and that's not the case. That becomes problematic and sometimes unfortunate because diversity is so much more than that. Their efforts directed more towards than racial inclusions. We're talking about women. We're talking about LGBTQIA community. We're talking about religion, age, and disabilities, just to name a few. Diversity does not mean replacing anyone or hiring a lesser qualified person in your businesses. It does mean, though, including others, and in some cases, it does mean changing the parameters of the way you think, changing the parameters of the way people around you think. So hopefully people today will come to realize that diversity is about fairness. It's not about giving jobs or positions to non-qualified people. It's not about taking from anyone. It's not about creating divisions. It's not about telling anyone that they have to associate with a specific group. You are business women and men who are in the business to ultimately make a profit. So let's see how diversity and inclusion can help your businesses. We're going to talk about foundations. This foundations is learning the basics of diversity, and we're going to go over some definitions. So the first one is, what is diversity? We're talking about things such as race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, language, culture, natural origin, religious commitments, age, education, marital status, disability, and political perspective. It's a perspective of ways people differ from one another. What is inclusion? The act of creating environments in which an individual or group can feel welcomed, respected, supported, and valued to participate fully. An inclusive and welcoming climate embraces differences and offers respect in words and actions for all people. It is important to note that while an inclusive group may be diverse by definition, a diverse group is not always inclusive. Also, increasingly, we also have to recognize our unconscious and implicit biases that may or may not help organizations to deliberate about addressing issues of inclusivity. Diversity and inclusion should not make a majority feel intruded on or a minority feel neglected. Diversity is a call towards action, something someone can demonstrate, behave, and enact. So to enact diversity, we must be inclusive. To be inclusive, we must be equitable. Poll question. Can you have diversity and not inclusion? I like seeing this. Just a few more minutes and we're going to discuss it. Okay, so the answer is yes with the poll. So that's good. That's a good way to think about it. Can you have diversity and not inclusion? Of course you can. Of course you can. So you guys were correct. But as one statement is often quoted, diversity, and just think about this for a second. Diversity is an invitation to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Or diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at the table, and belonging is having your voice heard at the table. So you want to always include all of those attributes of diversity and inclusion. Great job. Next question. Can biases be based on things other than race? And we're going to go more into the bias piece of it. All right. 100%. Good job. Yes. The answer is yes. You are totally correct. If you have these biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious, it becomes a factor of are you willing to be diverse and inclusive? So great job. And so this leads us to, what are our biases? Our biases, you often hear explicit and implicit. So explicit is your conscious biases. Implicit is your unconscious biases. So you were correct. Biases are not limited to ethnicity or race. They may exist toward any social group, whether that's age, gender identity, religion, sexual orientation, weight, or physical abilities. If you have these unconscious biases or conscious biases, you want to ask yourself always, are you exemplifying diversity and inclusion? And most times the answer is going to be no. So you want to be really conscious of that. On the screen, you see a quote: to know the true reality of yourself, you must be aware of not only your conscious thoughts, but also of your unconscious prejudices, biases, and habit. And that will help us guide us through this diversity and inclusion portion. Then you hear microaggressions. Words have power, and sometimes we do not realize that the power that our words have. So what are microaggressions? Microaggressions are brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether they are intentional or unintentional. They communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults toward people of color or other marginalized groups. There are also levels of microaggressions. You have microassaults, which are often conscious, which display explicit racial derogatory remarks characterized by violent verbal or nonverbal attack meant to hurt the intended victim. Now you have micro insults. These are often unconscious. These are behavioral or verbal remarks or comments that convey rudeness, insensitivity, and demean a person's racial heritage or identity. And then we have micro invalidations. These are often conscious. These are verbal comments or behaviors that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts or feelings or experiential reality of a person of color. These types of statements can create a hostile and validating work environment. This is what you don't want to create, which can also be harmful to a person's mental health, emotional turmoil, low self-esteem, and energy depletion, not to mention sleep disturbance and depression. So these are things that we don't want to happen. So how do you negate for this? You have to actually understand what they are. You have to accept them and then try not to do them. You see on the screen some examples of what they are. You have a mental disability. You seem perfectly normal to me. That's a microaggression. You natives don't have to work. Doesn't the government give you everything for free? Definitely a microaggression. So we want to make sure that while we understand our words have power, we want to negate from microaggressions. So you have to understand what they are. So biggest diversity issues in the workplace: acceptance and respect, accommodation of beliefs, ethnic and cultural differences, gender equality, physical and mental disabilities, generation gaps, and language and communication. You have to understand the different generations that are coming into your workplaces. Of course, we have the silent generation, that's 1925 to 1945. Baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Generation X, 1965 to 1976. Millennials, 1977 to 1995. And then your Gen Z. These are the ones that are usually have graduated from college or are coming out of college and getting those master's degrees and coming into the workforce. They're tech savvy, they're socially conscious, and they deal with their mental issues and they understand their gender preferences. This particular group is the most diverse generation ever. They are so diverse, they only notice the absence of diversity. So this is something to keep in mind when you're making your hires, when you're going out and to recruit different people to come into your organizations. And then you have the snowflake generation. This is between 2000 and 2020. They have an idea that they are entitled. They are also social media gurus. Another thing is that their parents are very involved in all of their decision making, whether that's a job, whether that's college that they're going to attend. They are very involved in their decision making. So you want to be sure that you understand the differences in the generations that are coming into your workforce. Benefits of workplace diversity. An organization's success or competitiveness depends upon its ability to embrace diversity and realize its benefits. When organizations actively access their handling of workplace diversity issues and develop or implement diversity plans, multiple benefits are reported. What is true diversity in the workplace? What does this look like? Diversity in the work environment promotes acceptance, respect, and teamwork despite differences in race, age, gender, language, political views, religion, sexual orientation, or communication styles among employees. There are many benefits to having a diverse workforce. In fact, it has been reported that companies that practice diversity and inclusion outperform other non-diverse companies by 15%. However, while that is true, as the workplace becomes more diverse, more issues arise accordingly. So what do? HR personnel and recruitment professionals need to be aware of the various challenges associated with diversity so that it can be prevented and addressed. We want to be proactive and not reactive. So what are some benefits? You have increased adaptability, variety of viewpoints from different people, from different backgrounds. You have a broader service range, and then you have more effective execution. So it is our national interest to invest in our future workforce. People of color today make up about 36% of the workforce. According to the Census Bureau projections, by 2050, 1 in 2 workers will be a person of color. So as our nation becomes more diverse, so too does our workforce. Diversity in the workforce offers also fosters innovation and competitiveness in our businesses. Studies consistently show that diversity drives innovation and fosters creativity. In a Forbes survey just recently, 85% of respondents said diversity is crucial for their businesses, and approximately 75% indicated that their companies would put more focus during the next 3 years to leverage diversity to achieve their business goals. So with that, we talked about what are our obstacles and challenges? What does this mean for small businesses? Having a diverse workforce can be a challenge for small businesses, especially in certain parts of the US and globally. To get the benefits of diversity, you may need to expand your thinking. But smart businesses of any size don't view diversity as a requirement, but rather as an opportunity to grow and succeed. So what do small businesses do? They have to think beyond race. They have to think beyond employees, and they have to think activities. And we'll go into those a little bit more. We'll dive into those a little bit deeper. So if you want to have a competitive advantage, you need new ideas and fresh perspectives. So with that in mind, it may seem that small businesses is at a disadvantage. It can be difficult, especially if you're running a 5 or 10 person shop, or even smaller than that, maybe a 1 or 2, to be diverse. Making matters worse, many small business owners fall into the trap of hiring people that they're comfortable with, or who like them, or who gets along with everybody. It gets even more challenging when you're drawing from an applicant pool that's fairly homogeneous. So we have to think of beyond race. Think about these questions when you think about that. Do men and women have the same opportunity in your company? Is your company welcoming to gay and bisexual or transgender coworkers? Does everyone go to the same church as you? Or do you pull from a wide variety of different houses of worship, including those who place science above religion? Have any of your employees served in the military or seen action? Did all of your employees grow up in your hometown? Or do you have people from all over the state, country, or globe? Does anyone have experience from a corporation? Has anyone been involved with a startup before? Has anyone ran a nonprofit? Is everyone a college graduate? Is anyone a college graduate at all? Further, do you have corporate culture that welcomes new ways of thinking? Or is your motto, this is the way it's always been? So we have to think beyond that, and we have to ask ourselves these probing questions. And now we have to think beyond employees. You have to create an environment of an extended family type of atmosphere. And then we want to think activities. Although extracurricular activities may not diversify your workforce, it can certainly help jolt your creative thinking and problem-solving skills. So professional development workshops may even work, even company picnics. Thinking outside the box. So if you want to have a competitive advantage, you need new ideas and fresh perspective, like I said. And if you struggle to find that diversity because of a small workforce or unvaried applicant pool, you need to consider new types of diversity and wider definition of your workforce. So what are some other challenges? Create a culture without resentment. Don't make it mandatory. Mandatory is a strong word, and it may deter or make individuals rebellious. So let's try words like required or encouraged. Implement without building resentment. Diversity should not be another module or metric. Remember, our goal is for it to become business as usual. So we have to think differently, and we're going to make this thinking process around people. Make it known in your company's values. Invite people from different backgrounds to speak. See diversity as multi-generational, having differences shape the person and allow for different ways of thinking inside your company. Diversity is not a luxury. It requires a strategic focus and is a necessity to survive. Poll question. Is your current workforce representative of your customers? Good job. At least you're being honest. I would really want you to be transparent. Okay. The majority is yes. Okay. And for those who answered no, this part is, so how do I get there? You have to manage diversity. So how do we get there? As organization success or competitiveness depends upon its ability to embrace diversity and realize its benefits. When organizations actively access their handling of workplace diversity issues, and like we said, develop and implement diversity plans, multiple benefits are reported. So how do you do this? What are the steps in doing this? You have to secure top management commitment, strive to increase accuracy of perceptions, increase diversity awareness, increase diversity skills like communication, encourage flexibility, pay close attention to how organizational members are evaluated, and then consider the numbers. 29% of you said that it wasn't representative of your customers. You have to consider the numbers and go back and reevaluate those things. So again, how do you take these steps? Empower employees to challenge discriminatory behavior, actions, and remarks. You can reward employees effectively by managing diversity. You can provide training utilizing a multi-pronged ongoing approach. And then you can encourage mentoring of diverse employees. This is depending on what type of company you are. All companies aren't the same. So there's no one size that fits all. So what might apply for you might not apply for the other. So you have to be mindful of what type of company and what the customers that you're serving. Change does start from the top down leadership. It happens at every level. And so what can I do? What can I do to get to that point? Change our mindsets. We have to stop looking for similarity and compatibility and start looking for diversity and difference. Be intentional. If we truly want diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to be intentional about bringing diversity into the makeup of the businesses and companies, in the meetings and the different work opportunities provided. You have to make sure that everyone feels included in everything that you do, so each individual feels like they belong. It's not only good for morale, but it's good for employee success and employees' performance. Christine Hayden, the Chief Partnership of Ignite, stated, "It's not autopilot. The autopilot is to hang out with people who think like you and look like you. It's actually about being present, and it takes intentionality to do things different." Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like we said, diversity and inclusion sometimes make people uneasy. So accept that achieving diversity isn't easy, but you'll have to embrace it for the ultimate outcome, and that will make it better. Lead with empathy. Pay attention and listen. Most times people just feel as though they are not being heard, so they want someone to listen to them. Have accountability for change. Become more conscious and unconscious, and know that you can do more and do better when it comes to creating and sustaining cultures of inclusivity. Transformation will happen when we have accountability for change. So what are some policies and best practices? Don't treat, like we said before, as diversity as another module or metric. Diversity and inclusion is not just another training module. Human resources establish the policies, but we have to be the ones who enforce them. We want to review current employees. We want to recruit, again, with intentionality. We want to increase talent pool with internal and external partnerships. Examine your websites and your social media accounts to make sure that you are being intentional about your diverse efforts. You don't want to just create words. Remember in the beginning, diversity is something about action. It's not just about the words. And then ask yourself, okay, now that I have this diversity, what do I do after hiring? So what are some possible policies to address that? Any policy must ensure that people are respected, inclusive, and the opportunity is presented to them to learn and grow. Again, think beyond race. Don't ignore it. Offer men and women the same opportunities. Respect different religious beliefs and holidays. Acknowledge veterans. Thinking about beyond race, this is not insensitive, but like we always said, diversity is more than just race. Offer men and women the same opportunities, fairness, and gender equity. Respect religious beliefs and holidays. Provide an atmosphere where different beliefs are celebrated. And then acknowledge veterans. What can you do? Acknowledge November 11th. Offer possible on-the-job training initiatives that will allow your veteran employees to use their GI benefits. And this is just to name a few. So you also want to capitalize on diversity as a strategic approach. This will enhance your organizational goals such as productivity and profits. Most private companies are free to decide about diversity on their own, but you still can't discriminate on hiring and firing. Small businesses with diversity are more innovative and perform better financially. Small businesses with diversity attract talent. Remember, back to the generations. They do their research. They're looking for those, Gen Z are looking for diverse companies. So they're going to do their research on what type of company you are. 67% of job seekers say diversity is important. 57% say companies should be more diverse. And so when you're looking at that, you also want to look at the different laws that are involved to keep away from any lawsuits or anything like that. And these are some of the major EEO laws that you don't want to get involved in and get intertwined with human resources. The Equal Pay Act, the Title VII and Civil Rights Act, Americans Acts with Disabilities, the Civil Rights Act, and of course the Family Medical Leave. And then impact of bias. We talked about those biases and those microaggressions. The courts are receptive to unconscious bias arguments, and large settlements have occurred in the past. So we want to stay away from that, even with small businesses. The EEOC explains that intentional discrimination includes conscious and unconscious stereotypes. So we want to be aware of what's going on with the different policies and laws out there as well. So if you're not diversifying, guess what? Your competitor is. Your competitor is, because they know how important diversity is. So this is what we don't want to happen. You don't want to make diversity and inclusion the Sisyphean task. It should be natural and business as usual. And just like Nike says, just do it. And some of you may ask, what is a Sisyphean task? This is a task that is endless and cannot ever be completed. A task that will never be done, no matter how long you work at it. So please take diversity, equity, and inclusion for what it is. It's not dumbing down. It's not about building up. It is about building up. Our goal is to make an environment where diversity is natural. It becomes business as usual. It should be a bridge to oneness, not a bridge to polarization. No one will or should expect or accept mediocrity. It is not about being felt as victims or victimology. It is not about creating divisions. It is about seeking the goodness from one another. And despite the confrontations and sometimes inflammatory discourses that may be prevalent today, we have to remember that our work is far from being done. But it's imperative that we continue to expand our opportunities for all to ensure that we're giving everyone a fair shot. And I'm going to leave you with this today. Diversity is a gift from life. Without it, we would all be the same and life would be boring. I've heard it explained like this. Through the contrast, we choose our preferences. And after choosing, we see even more variety and choose further. Just because a particular choice isn't a preference in the moment does not mean it's serving someone else in a positive way. It may also be something you will enjoy later in life. As a rule, taste tends to change as we grow. Diversity has brought us great pieces of art, music, food, clothing, and amazing films that have impacted our culture, thanks to the differing points of view that directors, writers, and actors have brought to the table. We all live together, yet we experience life so differently. It's a great opportunity to see life from a new perspective and experience, a whole new world with that we didn't see before. So this is what I want everyone to do. Appreciate the diversity in your lives and in your businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fields. Excellent content. Very good things for us to think about and consider. And you know, it's all about loving your neighbor and not from a distance. That means having them over, inviting them, having conversations with them, you know, all of that. So absolutely, very great information. Let me get back onto the screen. We do have several questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
So let's get to that. I'm going to go ahead and put on our screen our upcoming webinar so that we don't.
Okay.
We do have a shred day on August 15th here in Jacksonville. So if anybody missed the one we had here in Tyler, we're going to have another one on August 15th. That's a Saturday. And then our next webinar is on September 14th at 11:30 also. So all of you will receive an invitation to that. But let's get to the questions. We have 5 questions up here, so tons of them.
Okay.
Let's see. First question. If one of the biases is unconscious, what is the easiest or the best way to recognize that you do or that somebody else is doing it?
You would recognize them. First, you would define them, whether they're unconscious or conscious. Once you know that, then you recognize them. You deconstruct their hidden meanings, and you make sure that that person knows that. And then you acknowledge their effects. You have to know that this is harming that other person, whether it's unconscious. So those are the conversations that you need to have with each other, and feeling comfortable with opening up that that room of transparency. So you have to have those tough conversations, whether it's the employee or the employer, to say, hey, I think I may have said something insensitive. How do I fix it? Or where do we go from here? Or how can I? Those are those questions that you have to ask and feel comfortable with doing that. And that goes back to being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right. I think, you know, you have to build trust in your organization too, so that your staff feels comfortable coming to you with these types of things, and also to know them really well, to look for you may not know that you're doing something, but if you watch people's facial expressions, you know, something might not sit well with somebody. So being able to feel free to have a conversation with somebody will really help with those types of things.
Absolutely.
Second question, what are some resources or tips you would recommend using for recruiting a more diverse workforce? We struggle with receiving applicants with diverse backgrounds.
I would, and this is a small business, so I would look at different companies that focus more on those recruiting diverse, looking at the different colleges, looking at that are more diverse, whether it's Lone Star, looking at HBCUs that have diverse backgrounds. UT, your Texas A&Ms, looking at those different institutions to get that diverse background. They're coming out of colleges, they're looking for jobs, and they are there. You just have to work with the different institutions or different companies that are wanting to recruit these particular students for your companies. And I think institutions are really a good place to start, because they are trying to find people with their career development series to come to their different institutions to looking for employees. So if you're looking for that diverse group, institutions and universities are a place to start.
That's a fantastic suggestion. Thank you for that. Third question, if in an effort not to offend anyone, what are the most PC terms to use with regard to race? Black or African American, Latino or Hispanic?
You ask them. I know when I first started working, a lot of people, when they're apt to see Black people, they automatically think that African American is okay, or that it is the right thing to say. Well, I don't identify as African American, so I identify as Black. So it's okay to say Black versus African American. And so you ask those questions, and that goes back to building that trust and feeling comfortable with your employees. So you ask those questions. Do you? And now the thing is, it's not Latino, it's Latinx. So you have to be conscious of these different things going on, not to mention pronouns. If you're dealing with the LGBTQIA+ community, you have to know their pronouns and ask them and feel comfortable with asking them their pronouns. Do they identify as he, she, or he or she or they, and understanding those different things. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, ask for training. To bring someone in and have that safe space. You have to make your company a safe space, and then you'll feel comfortable with asking those different questions on how they identify.
Great answer. Okay, is diversity the same as affirmative action?
No, totally different. Affirmative action is about race, and diversity is not about race. Diversity has different, totally different things, and affirmative action is strictly about race.
Great. All right, last question in the queue here, and I'm going to check the chat box before we sign off here. So if I am a small company with only one employee, am I being diverse if I purchase from suppliers who are different sex, race, etc.? Or what if I mentor or give an internship to someone who is different than I am?
That's totally, if you're a company of one, that's totally fine. The key to that is that you're being intentional about it, not just to make it say that I'm going to do this to say that I'm diverse. It's about action, and it's about being intentional about it. So intentionality is key.
Great. Let's see. Okay. All right, one more question in the chat box. If you're talking to someone and they make a comment and then you address it, but then they in turn get defensive, do you have any recommendations as how to break that barrier, bring down the tension, and talk civilly while perhaps disagreeing? I've seen this done more on a generation gap basis.
Correct. You're dealing with your Gen Z. They are really strong about mental health issues. They're really strong. They're socially conscious, so they get offensive and defensive a lot. And so you want to make sure that you are not walking on eggshells, but being transparent with them. And that goes back with Michelle said, is building that trust. And I think once you build that trust, they'll feel comfortable enough to come to you or come to someone in your company to sit down and talk about it without having that defense mode already ready to launch at you. If it's get to the point where you can't, then I think conflict resolution and mediation may be an opportunity to bring that in as well, because they're going to be headstrong, and they are car salesmen to the T, and not to, that's just their mantra. They want what they want when they want it, and if they don't get it, they're going to be mad, upset. But we have to maintain the flow of what our real business is and what our goals are for diversity and inclusion.
Okay, very good. That was the last question we had. Dr. Fields, thank you again so much. And hopefully we will see you guys on Monday, September 14th at 11:30 Central Standard Time. Justin Huffaker, VP of Strategic Technology for DataMax, discusses how to keep your business from facing a cyber attack. Many of us are conducting more business online nowadays, so this is an important topic. We hope you will join us. Again, you will receive an invitation at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. 11:30 tomorrow morning, so be on the lookout for that. You'll also receive a link to the recording of this webinar so you can watch it again and share it with your colleagues. Thanks again. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.